Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Sarah Botches with the California Association of School Business Officials, representing 24,000 school leaders. We're joined today by our amazing panel to discuss reopening safely from the view of a CBO's chair. I am joined by Elizabeth Esquivel, our Senior Policy Director of Governance, Policy and Governance. And then our CBOs, our three amazing leaders, are Dina Felix, Director of Business Services from Placentia Yorba Linda USD, Lisa Gonzalez, Chief Business Officer from Mount Diablo USD, and Sheldon Smith, Assistant Superintendent from San Luis Obispo County Office of Education. As I mentioned, we have the slide decks available for you on the Q&A box. For folks interested in asking questions, we will have a Q&A session at the end of our presentation in about 40 minutes from now. You're more than welcome to start typing in your questions so you don't forget them, and then we'll go through them with each of our individual panelists. Let me go over the agenda for today's presentation. We'll be discussing three key areas: making critical decisions in a time of crisis, navigating public health during a natural disaster, and building reopening plans with local partners. And as I mentioned, a Q&A session at the end. The session's being recorded, so will be available within 24 hours should you want to rewatch it or share with others. With that, I'll turn it over to Elizabeth Esquivel.
Thank you. So you all have had to instantly pivot how you are going to provide instruction during this pandemic. Can each of you just walk us through what that journey looked like as you transitioned to distance learning on March 13th?
Good morning. My name is Dina Felix, and I am the Director of Business for the Placentia Yorba Linda Unified School District. We're in Orange County, right between San Diego and Los Angeles. Just a little bit of background on myself. I have been in education for 15 years. Fun fact, I started with Riverside County Office of Education as a fingerprint technician. So I got to fingerprint everyone, almost everyone in the county. Then I moved into a school district and worked in HR and the superintendent's office. And then I was faced with the layoff notification during the Great Recession, which is sadly the best thing that's ever happened to me, because then I moved into becoming the admin assistant for the chief business official at my district, and then continued to grow from there. I've been with Placentia Yorba Linda for the last 7 years in both the assistant director and the director role. So that's just a little bit about myself. I would say that as we prepared, how did we transition into distance learning back on March 13th? Starting in January, in our cabinet meetings with the superintendent, other assistant superintendents and directors, we started having what-if conversations in cabinet. Probably spent 15 to 30 minutes thinking of different scenarios that we might be faced with. And honestly, by the beginning of March, I was pretty COVID conversation over it. But in hindsight, they were just such good conversations that really prepared us for what was coming, even though we didn't know what was coming, right? And so during those conversations, our educational services team talked about how are we going to educate our students. So we started with packets, designing packets to send home with students. Our technology director, because we're not a one-to-one, one device to one student district, our technology director was thinking about, how many more devices are we going to need? What will our students need in areas where they may not have internet at home? How will we address hotspots? He was contacting, so this was early January, February. Our facilities and custodial team were looking at, what do we need at the site, cleanliness, adding additional staff hours to make sure that all of those high touch points were sanitized. And then, even our superintendent meeting with the Orange County Health Director and other superintendents. So I would say that it was really a collaborative effort. It's not something that one district, one team can do alone. Our Orange County Department of Education was so helpful in providing resources and bringing us all together, creating a guidance document as we went, and partners like CBO who constantly providing us with information on what it might look like. And then finally, just making sure that we were in constant communication with our families, so that they knew what to anticipate. And so every step of the way, we were communicating with our families through social media, through letters, just so that they were on the same page as we were.
There we go. There's always the unmute pause. Good morning, everyone. I'm Sheldon Smith. I'm the Assistant Superintendent here at the San Luis Obispo County Office of Education. Prior to this position, I was Chief Business Official in the Lompoc Unified School District that served Vandenberg Air Force Base. Prior to that, I was an IT Director in Paso Robles Public Schools. Prior to that, I was a assistant principal at a 1,100 student middle school, and prior to that, I was teaching middle school English. So I've taken somewhat of a circuitous path to this role, but I find that each one of the experiences that I've gained in each one of these positions has served me well in this job here at the county office. San Luis Obispo County, we have 35,000 students within the county, 10 school districts. For us, having to pivot to distance learning was by and large relatively easy because we run 3 small schools just within the county office. Among the schools within our county, our primary role was, and still is to help school districts with working their reopening plans, as well as working their distance learning plans. And I'm sure as we move on in this discussion, we'll be talking about the last mile issues that we have with students who live in remote areas where there isn't internet connectivity. That's perhaps is one of the biggest challenges that we have in this county is being able to fill the last mile. We could send kids home with Chromebooks, but if they can't connect to the internet, the Chromebooks are paperweights. So I'm sure we'll be discussing more of that. The other area within the county office, and I know we'll be talking a little bit more about it when we talk about public safety power shutoffs. But for us, being the county office, we manage upwards of 8,000 employees' paychecks, and even in the times of disaster, we still have to ensure that school districts can still move money with respects to being able to purchase materials, being able to order Chromebooks, being able to ensure that staff are paid, despite what the issues are. Fortunately or unfortunately, depending upon how you look at it, San Luis Obispo County has the last functional nuclear power plant. Subsequently, we go through a fair number of continuity of government exercises, and that has helped prepare our districts, probably a little more so with respects to COVID, public safety power shutoffs and such. So I know we'll be talking more about that, so I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Lisa Gonzalez.
Thanks, Sheldon. Welcome, everyone. I'm Lisa Gonzalez. I'm the Chief Business Officer here in the Mount Diablo Unified School District. We're here in the Bay Area. We cover 6 or 7 different communities and jurisdictions in Contra Costa County. And my background really is a mix of things, but for the most part, I've come from the school side of the house. So I've been an elementary, middle, and high school site administrator, and also led curriculum and instruction for a number of years. And I'm here in Mount Diablo, where we've got approximately 30,000 students and an annual operating budget of about $375 million. And one of the challenges that we had last year is very similar to Dina and Sheldon. There were certainly a lot of conversations taking place, not only in our school district, but with our county superintendents, with the chief business officers from the instructional side of the house. And everyone was really starting to have the conversations about what if? And when the decision was made on Friday the 13th that we were going to be closing schools, we expected that we were going to be closed for maybe 3 to 4 weeks. I probably join most of the school districts out there in saying that we weren't terribly well prepared or well positioned from a number of different aspects. My colleagues talked about technology. This move toward having basically one-to-one scenarios for our students was very, very difficult because we were not a school district that had really intended to be or had budgeted for one-to-one. So that in and of itself was extremely challenging. I think when you've got a very large school district, you have a lot of pockets of different approaches to technology. And what we realized was trying to get our more than 50 school sites all on board, moving the same direction in distance, where most people probably hadn't heard of Zoom yet, was probably one of the biggest challenges that we had to overcome. On top of that, in our district, earlier that week, we had just made the decision to reduce our budget by $21 million, including over 90 staff members who were going to be laid off. And so we were in the middle of downsizing. We then had to really pivot quickly to take a look at the financial implications. And while, yes, there were some areas where maybe in utilities and transportation, we were saving money because we weren't driving buses and we didn't have all the electrical use. At the end of the day, the budget impact was colossal for us because all of a sudden we needed more technology. We needed, we needed security around the clock. We were trying to send many of our employees home to be able to work, yet from a business and human resources perspective, we really weren't well positioned to do that simply because we don't have enterprise systems. So everything lives on a device that is connected to our network within our district. And so our focus on technology and infrastructure has really been one of the biggest ways we've really needed to try to pivot. We had a number of reopening teams. More than 200 people ended up on reopening teams across our district in a whole host of areas, from technology to cleanliness to instruction to communication. But I'd say that probably the most valuable one was really the reliance on the CBOs from across, the chief business officers from across our county, where we were getting together once a week to just talk. And although we had before done that once a month, the opportunity to just brainstorm and try to figure things out collectively, so we weren't all reinventing the wheel in all of our school districts while we were building the plane as we were flying it. So definitely a challenge for all of us, but the good news was that, we were all in it together. So it's been great to be able to network with so many and have so much legislative support from Sacramento as well.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you for that initial discussion. And as we saw, as we were moving to distance learning, and many of your areas were then affected by wildfires and power outages, we continued to provide meals as we moved into the summer season. And so I know we'll begin with Shelton, and there's a link on the Q&A box Shelton will discuss, but can you walk us through what it feels like to prepare and execute plans in this now, not only dealing with a pandemic, budget uncertainties as the budget wrapped up at the end of June, but really then seeing the real life in your face situation of power outages and wildfires? Shelton?
Yeah, so the back in 2017, when the wildfires were becoming prevalent in northern and eastern California, one of the things that became very apparent with my 58 other county colleagues is that working with emergency services and working with FEMA isn't something that they teach you in school administrator school. So starting in 2017, SECESA formed a committee on responding to emergencies related to fires, and then a year later with public safety power shutoffs. In the Q&A is a link to the SECESA website that has both those procedure manuals in there, and it's essentially it's not an emergency plan. It's not a manual, although I just refer to it as such. It is essentially a document that is broken up into before an emergency, during an emergency, and after an emergency. And when it comes to planning, that's the sort of mindset you have to put yourself in. We're all very good in schools with during emergencies with respects to fire drills, active shooter drills, earthquake drills, right? But no one in schools really had any familiarity with the planning that goes on the front end of that other than the safe school plans. And up until recently, no one had any experience in working with FEMA and the reimbursement in the recovery component. So in both of these documents, the mindset is that you plan for the recovery at the start of the emergency. And in order to plan for the recovery, where recovery starts at the onset of the emergency, you have to do some planning on the front end. So the documents are set up that way. The one of the things in working with FEMA is that they're very detail oriented. If I'm really angry, I'll just call them the IRS because it is very bureaucratic. Things aren't many times logical, but if you follow things in a very logical order in your documentation as well as in your preparation, working with FEMA is much easier. The one of the things I mentioned earlier was the whole notion of continuity of government or continuation of government. That's also very much in these documents, in that even though a district office may not be functional because there is no electricity or because of impending fire, government still has to move. And so the preparations that need to happen, what I call the upstream preparations, which are in school districts, having their documents in order and having their plans in place for when there is no electricity, to the midstream issues that we have here at the county office. We can't pay people unless we get payroll from districts. And then the downstream issues related to working with the county treasury, in that we can't get people paid if the county treasury is not powered up as well. So it's working with all those things and essentially having a good plan, but on the other hand, having these checklists of things such that people can refer to when they're in the middle of an emergency. So that's just very much a nutshell in from a county perspective insofar as how we work with school districts in these public safety power shutoffs or other emergencies. And I'll go ahead and hand it over to Dina.
Well, as it relates to our reopening of schools, we had reopened elementary schools, and I can't remember now the date. It feels like an eternity ago, honestly, since it happened. But I would say it was probably early October that we reopened. And then 2 weeks later, we were reopening for hybrid for middle schools. So that Monday, we reopened. All of us go to the school sites to welcome all the students and be of help to our administrators. And get back, we're in a meeting, and suddenly, I mean, within 5 minutes, we were evacuating a couple of schools because we had fires that started. The Santa Ana winds pick up here, and you know that when the Santa Ana winds pick up, that there's a danger for fire. So we had the Blue Ridge fire, which was in the same area where we had fires 12 years ago, and those were some pretty devastating fires. The elementary school that's in that area, it's difficult to access and then come back down. So, we activated our emergency operations center, which is what Sheldon was referring to as, our preparation when we have fire drills, evacuation, earthquake drills. So we activated that, and everyone worked together to evacuate those sites that were affected. At the same time, there were a couple of other fires that were surrounding us. And so our air quality was really poor, and the fire was traveling pretty quickly because the winds were pretty bad. And so we shut down schools for a total of, I believe it was 2.5 days, where there was no school on the first week that we had reopened middle schools. Fortunately, so that was a Monday. By Thursday, our cohort B, which is our second set of middle schoolers, they were able to come back to school on that Thursday. But really, again, it's collaboration of ensuring that we're in contact with all of our emergency services, police, fire, Red Cross. One of our sites is typically an evacuation center. And something that, I learned was that now evacuations, when you're going to the center, it's handled differently. People stay in their cars instead of coming into the building because of COVID. So just thinking of all of those things and being able to hear the different conversations while we're all in the same room, just to be well prepared and we're all on the same page. So that was just about a month ago that we experienced that. Just another thing to add to the book that we're going to write after the pandemic is over. And with that, I'll transition over to Lisa.
Thank you. My colleagues both talked really about responding to other natural disasters. And, we've had a number of smoke days here where we've had to close down schools. But, I'm really reflecting a little differently on this question, which is how do we prepare and execute plans? And what we learned in getting ready for the pandemic as it was sort of coming down was that although many of us were talking about it, we weren't really set up in our district to have a lot of cross-departmental teams that were able to immediately work with one another and even know who was in what positions. So really, the first recommendation that I have is, making sure that everyone in your district, especially in a large district, is aware of who is in key leadership roles and who are those support staff members, so that you can have a number of folks who are used to connecting with one another, who know one another, and there's a reliance of great ideas across teams. So what we started doing fairly early on was throwing the net really wide and saying, we're going to have a conversation of this. Who else needs to be part of the conversation? And I think that really helped us. One of the things that we had to do on March 13th was we had to go in and evacuate a school. It was probably 9:30 in the morning, and there was a scare of COVID-19 at that site. Again, it was one of those things where it was so reactionary with staff and with parents that I was one of the first on scene. And what we really had to do was figure out, how we were going to communicate, and then to find out that the site that we were at did not have a good evacuation plan. And so we did not have enough staff members there to be able to sign students out. It was the big aha that we had, that we also didn't have enough individuals on site who spoke multiple languages. And so we had a language barrier with hundreds of parents descending without enough parking. And I remember about 2 hours after the whole thing started, we pretty much had all the students gone, and it wasn't even 11:30 yet. We were absolutely exhausted, as if it was the end of a really, really long day, and it wasn't even noon. And many of us sat in the parking lot and talked for a long while on what we could have done differently and how this was a great trial run if we really had to do these types of evacuations in the future. And it was a very deliberate feedback loop that we all went through right then and there, because it was fresh in our minds. We revisited it a few days later to do the same exact thing. So the best laid plans are the plans that everyone knows about. And for us, it was a realization that in our principals meetings and staff meetings, we probably need to toss scenarios out that folks aren't used to get them thinking about the what if. And it goes across any type of disaster. It goes across any type of disturbances on campus. What would you do if you had this situation, and who would step in? And what would happen if you didn't have site administrators who were on site, and those left behind really needed to start making some of those decisions? So again, the cross-departmental teams, making sure that you've got a lot of documentation, making sure everybody understands their roles. Because oftentimes we have school plans for emergencies, and at the beginning of the year, those get filled out and they may go on a shelf somewhere, and you've got new people that come onto your campus and they may not know anything that's going on. And I'm not just talking about our district. Every district that I've ever worked in has a lot of those plans where in the event of an emergency, nobody really knows what their role is, or those key players aren't there. And finally, I think going through a crisis and going through natural disasters is a really great way to see and identify leadership in positions and in individuals that we might not have thought of before. That it's not just your district office staff or your principals or assistant principals that are the ones that are able to step up and lead and make decisions, but it's those key custodians, and it's those office managers, and it's even some of those school nurses that are able to jump in with those skills that we need at the time.
Thank you so much. So I think one of the reoccurring issues that I keep hearing is collaboration, which leads us to our third question on building reopening plans with local partners. I think our school districts have had to really collaborate with many local partners more than ever before. And so our question here is, as we're seeing some schools begin to reopen in a hybrid model and others being postponed due to a number of reasons, can you share with us what the process of creating reopening plans look like?
Yeah, so mentioned earlier the recovery guide, as well as the public safety power shutoff guide, as well as our experience here with COVID, it's become very important for school districts and county offices to become familiar with people in county government. As Lisa mentioned, the relationships have to be established beforehand. And as I alluded to earlier, fortunately, because we have a nuclear power plant, we go through a graded drill with FEMA twice a year where all these people have to come together. So fortunately, we already have a working relationship with the county administrator. We already have a working relationship with the county public health officer. We have a working relationship with the staff members at the Emergency Operations Center. Those are all things that probably wouldn't have happened if we didn't go through these FEMA drills, actually graded drills every other year, but they have proved crucial for us with respects to the reopening plans. Coincidentally, when we're talking about COVID school shutdowns, it was around March 10th-ish. We were already having a district superintendent's meeting here at the county office, and the superintendents were already talking about closing school the following week. And So on the 12th, our county already went ahead and closed schools, and we were a little ahead of the county health officer who made the declaration on the 13th. But nonetheless, it was done in coordination. Since then, for us, working with county health and working with the county health officer insofar as reopening plans has been a crucial role for us. One of the things that we had to get across to our school districts is that your reopening plan is a process. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach. It's not an exam where you pass or fail. It goes through it's more like a dissertation, I guess you would say, insofar as you put in a plan, it gets comments, it comes back, you make adjustments, and it's truly an operational document by the time county health blesses it. And working with school districts and thinking through the situations that and sort of navigating the requirements of having school in a COVID-19 environment has been something with which our office and county health has been working very closely with school districts. And the success there has been because we've had those relationships established well before COVID. So I'll go ahead and hand it over to Lisa.
So Sheldon just talked about the county office level, and now we're going to bring it down to the district level. And I can just say here in Contra Costa County, the Contra Costa County Office of Education has really been instrumental in bringing all the districts together, making sure that we're constantly sharing each other's plans, each other's memorandums of understanding with our bargaining groups. Because the biggest challenge that we have is sometimes it feels like isolation, but it feels like reinventing the wheel. And we've all got multiple bargaining groups in our districts that we've had to work through. So starting in June, we created a number of different reopening teams: technology, instruction, safety, both movement of students and cleaning, communication, parent support, food service, transportation, purchasing. And then we had a number of different working groups, and we had members of all of our bargaining groups. And we've got 5 different bargaining groups in our district, 5 different unions, plus a 6th group for administrators. And it was really getting everyone's input. And it was, Sheldon compared it to a dissertation and the rounds of revisions. And for us, it sort of felt like a marathon where, we needed to go slow to go fast, and we needed to work on endurance along the way. We tried to put as much information as we could online without being terribly overwhelming. And I think the first concern that most had was the cleanliness of schools and what the different phases were. And, if someone were to test positive or there was a thought that someone was positive, what that looked like. And so we put specific standards of cleaning on our district website so that the staff could see that, parents could see that. And quite honestly, we borrowed that from another district because we didn't want to reinvent the wheel. We could just tweak it for our own situations. And so for us, a lot of times it was really a plan, do, check, act, come back, try it over again. And, even lately, a lot of the schools in Southern California and some up in the Sacramento area, they're months ahead of us. They're already expecting students, or they've already had students back. We're looking at mid-January, depending on what happens. And so we're really learning from, the challenges that others have had and trying to understand what worked, what didn't work, and tweaking that for our own district. And one of the biggest challenges was trying to figure out, what do you do with high schoolers? Because high schoolers change classes every hour or so. And so we reached out to high school districts in Southern California to say, send us everything that you've got so that we can try to find something that works for us, and then having those conversations with neighboring districts. And finally, for us, one of the big pieces that we're still continuing to take a look at is the interactive process. So that's the process for employees who are letting us know that for some health-related reason, they're not able to come back. And then how do we support them? How do we look at staffing differently? And how do we provide, the continuance of service, not only for our students, but because we are a 30,000 student district with over 4,000 employees, making sure that the day-to-day business continues to take place. We couldn't do that without our bargaining group members. I can't say that it's always smooth. There have definitely been bumpy times, but I know in certainly talking with my colleagues from our county and around the state, the bumpy ride has been for all of us because there is no easy way to do this across the board. Dina?
So I would second what my colleagues have said about establishing those relationships. It works both for in-house and outside. So a district has to make sure that we're not operating in silos. So I'm here talking about communication, technology, transportation, but really those are not areas that fall under, I really am on the business side, fiscal. And so my CBO oversees all of those areas. But the fact that I can talk to a group of people about what my district is doing is really telling of how collaborative we are, and that we all work together. We're all on the same page. We are constantly meeting and discussing these because really we're all one unit, right? We all have to move together. And then also to what my colleagues were saying about collaborating with the County Office of Education and other agencies in our area. Fortunately for us, we had a really good infrastructure of our stakeholder groups because we do that for our local control and accountability plan. We already have those groups in place that we meet with. We have our parent advisory groups. We have our unions that we meet with, parents, staff, administrators. So we were able to pull from those groups and form these, reopening plan meetings and, having these logistic committees, kind of like what Lisa was saying, that focused on different groups, health, wellness, safety, cleanliness. Our facilities team, working with the site administrators to complete the attestation document, the checklist, to make sure that the sites are able to reopen. Sending out surveys to our community to find out, what if we were to reopen schools in a hybrid environment, would they have their students come back to school? So that was all very helpful. And then when we got to the point that we knew that we were going to come back, that we were going to reopen in a hybrid environment, communicating to our stakeholders what that would look like. So our facilities, transportation, and nutrition departments put this amazing video that really helped parents see what the classroom would look like. It also helped staff members who had been gone for, at that point, 6 to 7 months from the classroom and didn't really know what it looked like at school. So showing those shields that were going to go up on the desks, showing the filters that we had purchased, all of the PPE that had been put in place, communicating that, because it's one thing to be doing the work, it's another thing to make sure that everyone knows the work that has been done and to put everyone at ease as much as you possibly can. And then finally, thinking about all of the different needs that we had, from technology to transportation to PPE, just being so thankful for the CARES funding, ESSER, and the SB 117 funding that we've received. For our district, it's been about $17 million. And if I'm being honest, we were thinking, how are we ever going to spend $17 million by December to, the end of the school year? And not to worry, we've spent it. And on top of that, an additional $2 million. And so not that it's all spent, but we are projecting to spend it by those deadlines. Because we opened virtual academies, we expanded our home study program. So those need additional staff because, we opened a new school for online school, and all of these different needs, we've just really been able to maximize our funding that we've received.
Wow. Thank you so much. That was so great. I want folks to know that as we transition to the Q&A part, there's the LEA's demographics and informations for each of the districts in the County Office of Ed. As the way that we're handling the Q&A section, you're more than welcome to type it up. We also have a hand feature because we would love to hear your voice and where you could personally ask the question. So we'll give folks a second to type in their questions, but as they go through that, I'll just pose a question that came up from what you've all mentioned on parent engagement. This is an area that we hear through and through of how are we handling parent engagement? How are we working with our parents who overnight have become educators while they balance all of their responsibilities, which we understand it can be challenging sometimes. So how have your areas recognized and are supporting parents? We'll start with Shelton.
Okay, I was just going to say, yeah, one of the things that we're doing is we're hosting a webinar this evening with our county health administrator and have been working with our school districts insofar as notifying parents because they're in fact our audience for them to get firsthand information with respects to COVID, whether we're going to the purple tier or whether we're staying in the red tier. And in our mind, it's better that they hear it from the people who know these things rather than reading about it on Facebook. So that's one of the areas with which we've been making an effort to focus upon is having relevant, accurate information going to our parents, as well as being able to direct parents to the right person in a school district to be able to get those answers.
Lisa?
We started with parent engagement really as quickly as we possibly could back in the spring and have continued it. Right now we have our superintendent, got to give a shout out to him because he's been really doing an outstanding job. That's Dr. Adam Clark. And what he's been doing is at every board meeting, he has a superintendent presentation. And he's really been leading the efforts on reopening schools and addressing parent concerns, which you can imagine is particularly challenging in a district that's got more than 50 school sites. But what he's been doing is he's really been laying out the solid data and information. Certainly, I know that all the county's superintendents in all the various districts are doing things that are very similar. But then we're following up every Friday with a message that goes out to the community with a lot of other updates. We're making sure that all of our board meetings are recorded so that parents can go back and they can see those segments as well. And we're also adding study sessions for our board so we can have bigger conversations where parents can jump in and they can weigh in. You know, they can leave comments, they can email comments, they can ask questions and get those responded to. As a matter of fact, we've got another one that's going to be tomorrow. So we're doing that almost bigger touch points like that with the community every week. And then we are surveying our parents on a regular basis. We've been using Survey Gizmo, which has been an opportunity for us to really push information out and get it back. And of course, in the middle of all this, we also are switching our communication system. So we're moving to Parent Square and we're rolling that out with all of our site administrators to make sure that we're really focusing on multiple languages, that we can do it in ways that's not just emails going out, but text messages and robocalls to try to meet the varied needs that parents have in the way that they like to be communicated with and the way that they can receive that as effectively and efficiently as possible.
For us, when we first went into distance learning, and I said this earlier, we were communicating with our parents a lot through email. I would argue that we have the best communication specialist in the state. She's just phenomenal, thinks ahead. And so she has really led the communications effort in conjunction with our superintendent. So our superintendent, deputy superintendent, and now our assistant superintendent, we're sending just, information to parents on a weekly basis. And of course, you have to find that right balance where you're not saturating people's inboxes. Throughout the summer, giving them updates on the Return to School Steering Committee and the information that they going over. But once we returned to the hybrid environment, or once we reopened schools and we went into a hybrid environment, it really has been the principals who are communicating with the families, because it's closer to them to hear it from their principal who they know than to hear it from a global perspective. It's also easier for them to go to their principal with any questions. So I know that a lot of our principals, a couple of days before they returned to school, they held these information sessions, and families attended and just asked any questions that they wanted to. And they just continue to do that through, emails from the principal, meetings with the principal. And of course, our superintendent and our deputy superintendent, they received so many emails. It would be fun to tally how many emails they received. And our superintendent was adamant that every single person was going to get a response. And so he made sure he responded to every single one of those.
That's amazing. I think since we are talking to our capital community here in Sacramento, questions that keep coming up, which is the one responsibility that in the state budget was tasked on LEAs versus ISPs, internet service providers, about ensuring connectivity with students, is how has that felt on the LEA side, given that in some areas we might not have ISP providers having the bandwidth to provide services directly? And how have you tried to fill in that gap as an LEA? What are things that we should really be leaving behind with the community here in Sacramento, of things that we may not have discussed, but are aha moments that, as you've engaged and listened to each other, that is important that we leave behind? Shelton?
Oh, sure. One of the aha moments that has been discussed among my counterparts is that the internet is very much a utility, in that it's not optional. And now that we've had to pivot to COVID, connectivity, everything has been riding on the students, parents, or guardians' ability to connect to the internet. And without the internet, essentially distance learning isn't distance learning. And that's how we address that in the future. And in a post-COVID world, I certainly see internet connectivity as being something that is as prevalent as electricity that powers our lights and water that comes out of our faucets.
Lisa?
I have to say, when it comes to connectivity, I realized that the state wanted to jump in and provide some support, but it sort of feels like we've spent time addressing the symptom and not the problem. The problem that we have in our community is that we've got pockets of no connectivity, and it's mostly our lower income students and families. And we know exactly where those are. We purchased 1,600 hotspots, and as we gave them out, we did some creative Googling, and we were able to create heat maps. And so we know exactly where we have areas in our community, especially in the city of Concord, where families need something other than a hotspot. And hotspots are very expensive. I've spent hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars on hotspots, and I'm paying for those every single month. So I went to the city of Concord and I said, what else can we do? And so what they helped us do is we brought all of the providers that are in our area together for a meeting. And it really resulted in them telling us, well, we have all these discount programs. And quite honestly, that's not enough. What we really need is we need communities to be able to work with internet providers to find areas where connectivity is most needed and find out ways for those to be implemented in the community, whether we've got to work through the counties, we've got to work through the cities. All of our districts can tell you where a lot of those high need areas are. And they're not just for education. And that's why this topic is so important. If we go to another shelter in place, or if we have other natural disasters, it is being able to reach our homebound. It is our senior citizens who can't get out. It is those who have other health impairments. There are folks who, need information on health services and social services. So while it's important for education, this is a global issue that we need to be taking a look at for broadband connectivity across the board. And for anybody out there who's listening, this is where we most need your help and your leadership, because it's going to benefit our students, but it's going to benefit every single community across the state.
I would second the fact that that equity divide. Our students who live in poverty, who don't have access to the internet. I'm gonna say that our technology director is also amazing and probably the best in the state. And so he was thinking ahead, and in January, thinking about those hotspots for our students that would need connectivity. And so we were very fortunate that even though we did have some delays in receiving hotspots, that we got them and we were able to get them for our students because he was proactive. But again, it fell on him to think about these issues. But some other colleagues that were not so fortunate, or they were probably thinking about it at the same time, but maybe were third, fourth, fifth in line and didn't receive them. So, and even for our families that do have the internet, if you have 3 or 4 students in the home who are trying to access the same bandwidth, just how much that slows everything down. I know that I worked from home a couple of days, when we initially shut down, and all of my neighbors were taking all of my internet. So, just those things that we need to think about of, access really, and availability.
And then final thoughts that you would want to share as we, unfortunately, in some areas, like Shelton mentioned, we're going back in the purple. We're trying to communicate now. What does that mean for our communities in this world of uncertainty as we've crossed 1 million COVID cases in the state? What are your final thoughts that you would want to leave behind before we close? I'll begin with Lisa.
Final thoughts are, open communication is probably one of the most important things that we can do. Having a quick line to all of our legislators. And quite honestly, I think what's most helpful for anybody who is watching is to get the phone numbers for your chief business officers in your local school districts. Talk to them before you get ready to make a decision, and let us weigh in. And, happy to give my phone number to anybody who wants it. Just message me. Because if you're going to make a decision and you want to hear about how it's going to impact us, or if there's something else that we need, or are there special tweaks that we need, that's where we really need that open communication and partnership with Sacramento and with those legislators across our state.
Sheldon?
Oh, sure. For us, the key word has been flexibility, and I remind people on staff and people who I come in contact that this is historical. There's no one on this earth who has done one of these before, and that we have to be flexible, and that there will be an end at some point. But in the meantime, we just have to put ourselves in the mindset that this is an era in history that'll be written about in history books. So for now, we just have to essentially hunker down and do the best we can, and be flexible with everyone and with the conditions that are out there.
I would say thank you for the opportunity and for this platform, to Sarah and Elizabeth and Casbo for allowing us to tell our story. Because I think that so many times, in this haste of getting things done, and things come out that maybe you're not able to hear the story of what districts are doing and what our educators are doing. I mean, if you had the opportunity to sit in a classroom, I'm just blown away at what our educators are doing. And so thank you to everyone in attendance for letting us tell you a little bit about our past 8 months and what we've been up to over here.
With that, thank you so much. Thank you so much for being part of our panel presentation today and for our audience logging on. On Monday, December 14th at 10 in the morning, we will have a facilities-minded webinar where we'll have the facilities directors from Long Beach Unified School District and Fresno County Office of Education discussing how they're redesigning the classroom space. We didn't have that opportunity to get into, but really, thank you so much, Sheldon, Lisa, and Dina. We truly appreciate every single one of you. And thank you for those that logged on and stayed with us. Have a nice day.